Alright, that's it. Navigation, report. On it, Commander. Modulator computer says we made a clean jump in 0.4 seconds, and a view on outside cameras confirms we're no longer in Asha system. Sending confirmation request right now, and there it is. Home confirms our jump as well, with same data. We made it. Good. All sections, this is Commander Kuo. Wormhole jump was successful. Everyone confirm and report. Comms here. Everything's in order. Engineering reporting all systems green. Modulator temperature within acceptable parameters, beginning venting sequence right now. Labs here, all green. The main sensors are coming back online and scanning boys are already away, but we won't have to turn the main ones off in the future. That energy spike we were expecting didn't happen, and hold that thought, Mr. Leonov. Still need to check with the rest of the ship. Security here. Everything's quiet on our end, but I'm sending my men to do the sweep of the ship just in case. Medbay reporting. We have a single person in need of medical assistance. Engineer Writer passed out, but according to her team it happened shortly before entering wormhole, so hopefully it's not connected. Confirm it. We can't afford to use an engine that's dangerous to our people. Understood, Commander, but I don't think that's the case. Engineer Writer presented elevated stress levels for several weeks now. I think her body took too much and simply turned her off for a while. Preliminary scan shows her vitals are stable. If I may, boss, I can confirm what Doc said. Frida always was jumpy. Well, not always, but for most of her life at least. And she wasn't taking that whole dimensional travel well. Anyway, she tends to collapse under stress in situations like this, so Doc's probably right about keeping it cool. Understood, Mr. Drakovich, but it's better to be sure. How did you come to know one of my engineers anyway? You know about these riots that happened in Frost Peak some years ago? The ones from your dossier, yeah, I remember watching them on TV. We didn't have much in terms of civil unrest for almost a century now, so it was scary as hell. I was on the other side of the world and still was afraid. Yeah, well, there was no time for watching TV back then. Anyway, Frida used to live under Frost Peak with her parents and her sister. When the riots happened, she was, what, 7, 8? Anyway, she had no idea what was happening, but her older sister joined the mobs to throw rocks at the police. Quite a lot of teenagers did, pissed about all that squalor they had to live in. And she dragged Frida along, and they just kinda stumbled into police patrol, just a few guys trying to stay out of the hell on the main streets. But Frida's sister was mighty pissed off by then, so she rushed them, knocked one out with a brick, but then the other one hit her with a mace. Just wanted to scare her off, but you know how it is. He was a topside guy who ate better food, so he had some more muscle on his bones, and she was a scrawny teen from the caves. Caved her skull right in. I pulled some string after Tessa gave me this post and found out he actually killed himself a week later. Couldn't stand being a murderer. But Frida saw all that and it messed her up, as you might expect. She does a good job of hiding that, but she's prone to losing her cool when she's stressed. I know all that because she and her parents hid with my crew for a few days before chaos cooled down. But then Tessa and his eggheads came into power, opened up schools for everyone, and she turned out to be so smart she was offered a spot on the first space mission. Kinda makes you wonder just how many dregs are still out there, stuck in mines or mushroom farms, unaware of their own talents. Pardon the interruption, gentlemen, but the sensors are back online. But there must be something wrong with them. What they're showing me simply can't be right. What do you see, Mr. Leonov? Home. The scans pick something that looks almost like home.
Space, the final frontier. These are the voyages of Starship Tesla. Its current mission, to explore Rama's system. To finally bring humanity to the stars. To boldly go where no one has gone before.
Captain's Log 2203. After a great many preparations, we finally concluded our very first wormhole transport jump, effectively bringing humanity into the age of interstellar expansion. The preceding weeks were stressful, and this stress took its toll on my crew, but as of today I can happily say that there are no side effects while using this type of transport, so very soon another ships will be able to chart their way across the stars in the name of mankind. But for us aboard CSV Tesla, the job had only just begun. With the tests concluded, our next task was to explore Rama's system, and then proceed to other ones. But that very first step we took gave us a taste of what awaited us in the verse. But let me start from the beginning. As soon as we entered the system, our sensors confirmed presence of only two planets, a gas giant and another, more regular, familiar one, except that familiarity immediately struck my science officers as an uncanny one, for the planet that showed up on our sensors looked amazingly similar to Ortus, our home. The very first scan showed us similarities, in its distance to the parent star, the atmosphere and its composition, mostly nitrogen and oxygen, and as we got closer, those similarities grew even more numerous. As we reached the orbit, our first drones confirmed what many of us already suspected. Climate-wise, this planet was almost a perfect copy of Ortus. There were variations, of course, but after first several probes returned with their data, it became obvious that we finally found a world a man could walk on without environmental suit. So, I ordered all three landers to be prepared, and on the very next day, over half of Tesla's crew was ready to land on the world that could soon become our second home, or so we thought. As our landers made their way to the surface, our scanners picked up something else, a rhythmic flowing movement on the surface. At first we thought nothing of it, we believed it to be just grass. We had some valleys back on Ortus overgrown with very high grass that, whenever there was wind, flowed and weaved looking like waves on the ocean, and in our excitement we assumed the same. We realized our mistake as soon as we landed, but by then it was too late. We opened the lander doors and realized, our eagerness turning into terror, that in front of us stood an entire swarm of huge buffalo-sized spiders. Drawn in by movement, they followed our landers, and as soon as we opened the hatch, they charged in, dragging two of my men outside. If not for the quick reaction of my security chief, we would have died out there, but he immediately opened fire and held the swarm off long enough for us to close the hatch. Other landers had more luck. They waited for our confirmation, so as soon as they heard screams, they flew back to orbit, and a few minutes later we joined them. But those two men who were dragged out there were not among us, and two more would very soon die from poisonous wounds, sustained during retreat. Within less than an hour, our cheerful excitement turned into dread. We found a place that we could live in, but instead of happy news, the only report we sent back was yet another name to be added to the list of off-limit worlds. For a moment, we thought about retreating back to Ortus, but the Council ordered us to continue our mission. The families of those we lost in Ramas 2 would be compensated, but their deaths couldn't impact the greater goal. We made a mistake back there. Our eagerness blinded us to threats that could have easily been avoided if we were just a bit more careful, and in the name of my fallen crew I swear I will learn from this mistake, and I will never let it happen again. So, we continued our mission, and near the star Ramas we found yet another surprise. Our probes picked up a massive object orbiting the star, but due to very high radiation and temperature, reaching it, even using unmanned drones, would be very risky, especially since this object's orbit was apparently highly unstable. In theory, we could have risked it, but after that disaster at Ramas 2, I decided to just let it slide, for now at least. This star and this mysterious object won't go anywhere. One day we're going to return with better equipment and with more experience, but I'm not going to lie, leaving this thing behind without knowing what it is will make sleeping in the night more difficult. Finally, we proceeded to Ramas 1, a scorching hot gas giant orbiting close to its parent star, and although the wind patterns on its surface gave us some insight into various meteorological matters, ultimately the planet was rather unremarkable, and as I said it I realized, along with my crew, just how bizarre this sentence was. When we observed the universe in ages past, we thought it to be mostly empty void, dotted with stars and dead floating rocks. Turns out there's so much to be found out there that simply finding a planet that is boring seems like an anomaly in itself. With exploration of Rama's system completed, we returned home, and just in time because, as we waited for the wormhole to open, we received the news that these new gravitic sensors developed by Dr. Poniewski finally entered production, and our ship was to be the first one to test them out in the void. Now, I realized here that some of you listening to these records, I've been informed they're being transferred to OCN's Astronaut Academy above Ortus, might not know just how exactly we were communicating with home as we were on our mission, not to mention the more important question of how we got back home, since there wasn't a generator in Ramas to open a way for us. See, that modulator we have on board is actually using the very same tech as the big generator outside of Asha's gravity well, only it's a miniaturized version of the big one. The main problem with this way of transport is this: you can't open a ship-sized wormhole within gravity wells of stars and planets, they just collapse within microseconds. But what you can do is you can open a microscopic wormhole in a controlled environment, the aforementioned modulator, and send a data stream of light particles through it. You can use it to send information to and from the main generator, and from there they're transferred either to Ortus or to us, but most importantly you can send your coordinates and instructions to open up a wormhole at your current position, so you only need a generator at the one end of your journey. Of course, if something happens to the modulator, you're pretty much screwed, but at the very least, the rescue mission will be sure you're in the same system you went to last. With new sensor equipment successfully installed, we were ordered to explore the Scorin system, another one relatively close to us, and unlike Ramas, its main star was yet another L-class, same as Asha. The reasoning behind sending us there was to check out if other L-stars could also have life-supporting planets around them, and as soon as we finished our jump, we received a positive answer. Though most planets here were regular barren space stones, Scorin III showed its potential for habitability on the very first scans, and as we got closer, we learned that it was yet another planet that almost perfectly mirrored Ortus in terms of climate and biosphere. But this time the excitement was dimmed. We were still thrilled to see just what this planet had in store for us, but this time we wouldn't allow ourselves to be blindsided. The first away crew was chosen about a month before we even reached the planet, and they spent every waking minute of our journey preparing for the worst. We modified our exosuits with more armor plating. Cumbersome but efficient, and Mr. Drakovich ran a military training for 6 hours a day in hopes to prepare our scientists for unexpected complications. I'll admit, we're not exactly prime material for soldiers here on Tesla, but at the very least this training might give our crew some mental preparation, so they won't just stand there slack-jawed like they did when 2 of their friends were torn to pieces back on Ramas 2. But this time things went different, in a way no one could expect. We encountered some vicious wildlife in colder regions of the planet, but other than that, everything went smoothly, no losses and no wounds. The planet was just a perfect spot for people of Ortus to live in. Sure, our Earthborn ancestors would have hated it, but for the new humanity, Scorin III was home away from home. But as we prepared to pack our equipment, return to orbit and send good news home, something happened. Our sensors picked up tons of movement all across the equator, but this movement was different. We got used to animal hunting patterns or migrations, but these vectors we saw on our scans showed something else: purpose. Whatever these moving things were, they clearly had some idea of what they were doing, and for that they became our primary concern. Our landers raced towards the equator, with every crewman armed to the teeth, but as we landed we were rewarded with a sight that will probably remain with me for the rest of my life. During our exploration, we encountered hundreds of individual human-sized fungi that grew along the frozen lakes, rivers and seas of Scorin III, but what we initially thought to be just an inanimate mushroom turned out to be an animal that just woke up from some sort of hibernation and began migration in search for something. We were cautious at first, but the living mushrooms turned out to be docile, and after some long-distance convincing from Professor Tanwa back on Ortus, we took several dead ones we found back on board for further study. Heda wanted us to bring in several live ones, and I was almost ready to give the order to make it so, but then our bioteam approached me with groundbreaking news. They were performing tests on the dead fungoids and tried to interact with living ones, and came to unexciting conclusions. These beings, dubbed Kithri by our crew, were actually very highly advanced, and their brains show extensive signs of cognitive thinking, self-awareness and sentience. To put it bluntly, they were like apes back on Earth, and we reached them in the moment they were getting down from the metaphorical tree. This discovery immediately placed them on the forefront of our efforts, but because those beings were not just simple animals, taking some of them home for further invasive study simply wouldn't be right. It was already problematic enough that the Kithri emanated some sort of spores that, when mixed with human biology, created an extremely strong reaction of hunger focused on Kithri themselves. We theorized these spores were used to deter predators native to Scorin III, but in this case evolution didn't count for visitors from across the stars. Still, the data from these spores could potentially be used in farming back home, so maybe one day we'll learn how to prepare frost steaks that don't reek of buffalo. At any rate, we left several unmanned research posts back on Scorin III and continued our mission, but this time we finally found a place we will gladly return to, so we flied forward with our heads high. And yet, the galaxy once more found a way to leave us completely dumbfounded. We were gathering some data from Scorin III itself, just a preliminary scan, a more detailed one requested by the Science Council would come later, when our sensors found out something so bizarre we couldn't believe it and retried the scans 3 times before finally accepting bewildering truth. There was a small ceramic container, similar to a teapot, slowly orbiting the star. How it got there and for what reason was a mystery, but in the interest of time we decided to let that mystery remain unsolved for the time being. And to make this week even crazier, we received a message about a popular vote back on Ortus. Apparently, Chancellor Tessa's niece had a dog, and that dog happened to have a single cub. Nothing weird about that, of course, but as it stood, this was the very first animal to be born outside of Ortus, on board of F-29 mining station. The dog was presented to Tessa, who, in his endless excitement about all things from space, decided to call for a vote on the name of this small creature. Democracy can be weird sometimes, but from what we've learned, billions of people across the world took part in this vote, and in the end the dog was named Caesar. That's Chancellor Tessa for you. He came to visit his family, he saw the dog, and he used it to conquer the poles. I mean, seriously, what opposition could compete with a space puppy? But Scorin's system left most amazing discovery until the end. We were doing a flyby over Scorin IV, yet another highly toxic planet, when we picked up something we have seen before. Various ruined structures that, to astonishment of my team, were placed in the exact same pattern as the ones on Nexon, with a handful of them piercing the cover of toxic fog and more of them located beneath out of our reach. I ordered an emergency meeting, and while the risks weren't as high as they were before on Nexon, my crew decided we're still not going to take it as chance. Ramas 2 made us cautious after all. Still, we gathered all the data we could and sent it back home, but as we were preparing to continue our mission, I was approached by 2 of my chemists. They claimed that with some time, they should be able to create some sort of protective chemical coating that would allow our drones and scientists to go down there and check the area out thoroughly without melting. An engineer-writer claimed that she had enough information to pinpoint a landing zone that we could use without collapsing the entire complex. I'll admit, seeing these ruins basically for the second time made me a bit obsessed about them, so I agreed to their plan. For now though, we would continue with our mission. The chemists could walk in the background, for there was still millions of secrets to be uncovered out there. We finished our research of Scorin Star. There were some emissions there that Science Council believed to be useful in developing more efficient way of generating energy, and returned to toxic Scorin IV with new equipment in tow, ready to finally uncover the secret of mysterious ruins there. We tested the chemical coating on our drones at first, and when it proved to be efficient, we applied it to exosuits and sent an away team, with me at the helm, knowing that now we can survive several days down there, not several seconds. It still was a nerve-wracking experience though, especially as everything around us started to rumble as we touched down, but thankfully the ruins held together, and what we found in them would be on Science Council tongues for years to come. The ruins were actually some sort of a beacon or a communication station, but while initially we considered them to be inactive, the truth was completely opposite. They were still transmitting some sort of a broadcast, except using a way we never thought possible. The pylons we saw piercing the sky emitted some sort of waves that, after further analysis, turned out to be chillingly similar to human brainwaves. These wavelengths were completely inaudible to us, and only the most advanced neural sensors picked them up, but the feeling was overwhelming. We were standing in a walking, gigantic brain made out of metal and stone. We immediately tried to decode the message in the waves, and it's a long, looping, hour-long one, but it quickly became obvious we were way out of our league. 2 days later we prepared to launch, loaded with terabytes of exceptional data, when one of my engineers contacted me. He said that while these psionic pylons, as my team started to call them, were impressive and all, he had a different idea on how to use them. Instead of researching, we could instead dismantle them and use the newly opened way to access mineral veins underneath the surface. An interesting idea that could greatly increase the potential value of this planet, but the minerals in question, while numerous, were mostly of very poor quality. Not to mention that the rest of the team were revolted by the idea. We had a spot that could provide our scientists with decades worth of research. Abandoning this possibility in the name of profit just seemed wrong. So we marked the pylons on our charts and sent word to the Science Council. But we didn't wait for a response. There was one thing I wanted to confirm as soon as possible. That thing was, as you might expect, the ruins we found on Nexon. We applied the same approach there and were rewarded with the exact same results. Everything about these ruins was exactly or almost the same. A similar geographic location, the same building pattern and material, and the same hour-long message we couldn't understand, endlessly looping over and over. Once more we marked the spot for the Science Council, but now we had even more questions. It was obvious that these pylons were built by some sort of spacefaring civilization, but for what purpose? Have they used them to talk between systems? Were these two locations a part of some greater communication web? I could ask those questions for days, but we still wouldn't be any closer to an answer. It's time for the Science Council to take over the investigation, and I have to admit, I kinda envy them. We ran a quick resupply run back at home and dropped off the data we gathered and continued our mission. This time we headed for Clue, binary star system that baffled our astronomers, as they often saw a third, very dark source of light there. So we prepared to jump, and learned that our generators could prepare a wormhole in any spot outside Asha's gravity well, not only in generator's vicinity, but few minutes after we entered the system, our sensors went completely crazy. There truly was another source of light there, a Y-class star, very hot but very dark, orbiting the binary stars in the center of the system. But right next to it, we saw a massive energy signature, a cloud of pure energy particles that moved and weaved in a way that made it seem almost alive. Thrilled by this discovery, I ordered the helmsman to plot a course for that mysterious cloud, but that's when things got slightly out of hand. Shen, for the last time, I don't give a crap about your scans. I'm not letting you take this ship any closer to something that might be alive and dangerous. You can send your probes to check it out without putting the ship at risk. It's too time-consuming. It would be at least 2 weeks before the probes get there, and by that time this thing might flee, or our probes might scare it and force it to flee. We have an unprecedented opportunity here, and you want to leave it because you're scared. And of what? We don't know if this thing really is alive, only that it moves like it was. And that is enough of a reason to consider it a threat to this ship and its crew. Your scans may be incomplete, but have you looked at what we have? With the amount of energy this thing outputs, it's going to fry our sensors to shit if we get too close to it. I can't let you take a gamble like that. Thankfully, I'm in charge of this ship. Helmsman, this is Commander Kuo. Proceed to designated coordinates right now. Sorry sir, but I can't do that. What? Why the hell not? Well, Chief Dracovich's people are here, and they asked me to kindly step away from the controls, and they have rifles, so I'm going to oblige them. Again, sorry sir. You. First those news about pirates, and now a mutiny aboard our very first ship. What are you trying to accomplish here? You have nowhere to go, and as soon as the Council finds out you led a mutiny, they will send Admiral Shu to hunt you down and put you in the mines for the rest of your life. No, they won't. First, I'm going to go back to Ortus immediately, and second, I'm only doing my job here. Nothing in my contract says anything about being loyal to you, but there's quite a lot about protecting CSV Tesla and her crew from all threats, internal or external. And right now, Commander, you are an internal threat that wants to bring us to an external one. I don't care whether you want to impress the Science Council or that biologist girl back on Ortus. Your actions are dangerous and force me to relieve you of your command, so I'm going to ask nicely once again. Will you stand down, or do I have to remove you by force? It's not like I have much of a choice. Good. Sarge, escort the commander back to his quarters and make sure he has all the amenities he needs there. Now, where's the comm? Attention crew of CSV Tesla, this is Security Chief Royland Drakovich speaking. Our commander's action have forced me to relieve him of his post and take control of the ship. Some of you will think this a mutiny. Let me assure you it's not. As soon as Commander Kuo is safely within his cabin, I will order my men to lock me in the brig. They will then pilot the ship back to Ortus for investigation. You have a right to be confused and angry, but do not interfere. This decision was made with your best interest in mind, and if the Council decides they wish to punish me for it, then so be it. Drakovich out. I spent several long days alone in my cabin, and after I cooled down I started to think about what happened. At one hand, Royland was right. Whatever this thing, or this being was, its energy signature was that of at least 50 nuclear warheads. But on the other, its very existence, the sheer improbability of it, means that in the name of science we should have proceeded with my plan of studying it. I hope that we still might be able to in the future. Still, what's done is done. and I'm at least happy this situation hasn't escalated. It could have gone far worse if I hadn't stood down. At any rate, Drakovich turned out to be a man of his word. When we reached our orbital spaceport, his security team transferred both me and their chief to the authorities, and we spent next 3 days waiting for the hearing. Turned out it was quite a big one. Both Ishi and Tessa came to orbit, and needless to say, they were less than impressed with our story. Tessa wanted to throw us in the mines outright, for putting his entire political and economical efforts at risk, but Ishi convinced him to offer us a deal. First, all crew members of Tesla, past, present and future ones, would have to swear an oath of secrecy and never talk about this mutiny on pain of lifetime imprisonment. Second, Royland would be fired from his post, and third, the Council would appoint a new security chief. We agreed, of course, though Drakovich was angry about being booted so fast. Still, if I know anything about Tessa and Ishi, then this entire trial was nothing more but a good cop, bad cop play to keep appearances. They're not the ones who throw assets away when they can still be used. And there was one more thing. When we were flying back home, a massive, town-sized ship moved past CSV Tesla and entered a wormhole to Scorin system. That ship was CSV Prosperity, the Council-built colony vessel housing 200,000 brave pioneers who would create our first colony on Scorin III, already dubbed Curaçao, in memory of the very first colony of old Commonwealth back on Earth. And though I'm excited about the possibilities it will open, I'm still ashamed that I wasn't able to see it. For, you see, for this colony ship is going to be a one-way trip. At first, the Council wanted to use it as a massive cruise vessel that would transport hundreds of thousands of colonists to their new world, but Professor Tanwa presented a different solution. Instead of moving huge amounts of people, who would be difficult to sustain, the ship could be designed in such a way as to allow it to land on the surface of Curaçao and then be reassembled as both shelter for the first pioneers and as an administrative center. The ship generator could be used as colony first power source, and life support system could help the colonists survive without necessarily being exposed to the elements. And so, on February 9th, 2207, mankind's first colony in a different star system was formally established. We are now an interplanetary species, a feat worthy of a celebration. A crew of CSV Tesla was drunk for a few days after that. The exploration continued. We returned to spider-infested Ramas system, and with upgrades to our equipment, we were able to finally access that mysterious massive object located very close to the star there, which turned out to be an abandoned space station. Yet another proof that once this part of our galaxy was inhabited by spacefaring intelligent beings. Sadly, we found no traces of them. The solar radiation made sure of that, but the station itself was in exceptionally good shape. So good, in fact, that with just a few modifications we could have used it ourselves and researched the Ramas star from an unprecedented position very close to the surface. However, the Council intervened. The shielding technology used on that station was something we have never seen before, so instead of adapting the station to our needs, we were to attach several engines to it and pull it further from the sun, so Lachanov's people could get to work on dismantling it and studying its secrets. Perhaps that is for the best. Oh, and another thing. While we were away, the OCN approved construction of yet another science ship, under command of one Melanie Giraud. There is another commander out there exploring the stars for humanity. I hope one day we'll be able to meet and share our stories, or maybe we can exchange our logs at least. Our next stop was just as interesting as other ones, if not more. Over a century ago, our astronomers found out some anomalous distortions with their telescopes, and ever since that moment they theorized that Asha might, in fact, be very close to a black hole. Our next destination confirmed that theory. As soon as we jumped to the sector it was supposedly located in, our sensors went completely haywire, unable to process that bizarre phenomenon of such strong gravitational force that nothing, not even tiniest particles or radiation or even light, could escape it. I wish I had good words to describe this part of the mission, but you'll have to forgive me for being a bit surreal in this log. First, even describing it escapes my grasp. You know how our eyes operate on picking up light reflected from various objects? Well, the black hole doesn't reflect any light, so you can't really see it. All you perceive is a black tear in reality itself, and the only thing that makes it visible is the accretion disk of matter that is constantly drawn into it. Simply looking at it makes your head spin. Then there's that theory about time distortions near the black hole that made us fear that we'll return to our homes hundreds of years later without even realizing. At first it almost made me abandon this project, but majority of the team insisted, and so we went in. Now, I'm not going to record my personal comments on those several days, I'll let the official report speak for itself. Long story short, while the black hole, called Demon's Maw by some of the crew, is still way out of our reach, it can still be of tremendous use to our people. Thanks to efforts of our physicists, we were able to locate a point where the gravitational pull, while still overwhelmingly strong, is distorted enough to form a pocket of some more manageable forces, and according to my chief engineer, this pocket could be used as a testing ground for some of our equipment. If it can survive the conditions there, it can survive pretty much anything. We marked the spot with buoys, or well, we tried to because they were immediately sucked into the void, but we made a clear enough map to this spot. We're going to transfer it to Ortus along with our findings, and I'm betting we'll soon see Lachinov's men testing out hardware there. They will have to wait for CSV developer to build them some staging ground first, but from what I learned about the foreman of these hard huts, she's not the one to shy away from challenge. She'll throw everything down just to be able to brag she built a space station next to a goddamn black hole. Also, since we're on topic of engineers, I'd like to personally commend engineer Frida Reiter for her efforts near Demon's Maw. Initially, she was the most reluctant one to proceed with this mission, stressing out almost to point of losing consciousness, but as we entered the sector, she went to work with an inspiring fervor. Keeping gravity generators operational and preventing the ship from falling apart under such overwhelming force was possibly the most difficult task any one of our engineers ever faced. But Frida's efforts saved lives and equipment out there, and she neglected sleep for almost a week to make sure we'll make it through in one piece. She deserves a medal, a raise, and a nice rooftop apartment in one of our topside cities for that. We returned home for a bit after that, and realized with relief that there wasn't any kind of time anomaly back at Demon's Maw, but when we jumped back to Asha, we realized immediately that something has changed. When we were leaving, we were seen off by Spitfire, our single military ship, but as soon as we jumped back to Asha, our sensors immediately picked up more of these ships, all arrayed in a patrol formation. At first, we thought something went wrong with our mission, that they were to intercept us, but Admiral Shu quickly clarified everything. They were acting as law enforcers. There has been some deaths since the Expanse project began. These were inevitable. A lost walker here, a leaky environmental suit there, coupled with inexperience of our people, meant that accidents were bound to happen, but nobody expected murder. Just a few days after we left, one of private cargo ships that transported goods to and from F-29 mining base picked up a distress signal from similar vessel on the road back to Ortus. With some impressive maneuvering, they managed to dock with said ship, but as soon as they opened the bay doors, they realized it was a trap. The ship that sent a signal was full of people who boarded a now immobilized freighter, and one thing led to another and 6 people lost their lives, but fortunately not before one of them sent a message back to Ortus. The attackers tried to be smart. Instead of flying home on the main highway, they skittered around, trying to use asteroid field as cover, but unfortunately for them, Admiral Shu worked 3 years as air controller near Zair Wadi, where she had to guide small supply aircraft through never-ending snowstorms. That expertise helped in her pursuit, and she found and caught up to them, and retook both ships without losses. The pirates were arrested and are now waiting for trial back on Ortus, but I don't think Council will be easy on them. In this time of humanity's very firsts, they showed our darkest side, and I believe they're going to be sent to the deepest mines to serve a life sentence there. It may not seem like the most humanitarian way to punish them, but their actions created a dangerous precedent. It won't be long now before another group of desperate fools will try something similar, so the Council will act harshly in order to deter them, and because of that, these people won't stand a chance in their trial. If they had stolen something on Ortus' surface, no one would have cared too much, but as it stands, minerals from space are considered strategic resources, which makes their crime an act of sabotage, and because of that, their laws are forfeit. Regardless, there was one immediate move from OCN. They approved construction of more warships, and the Science Council has been given order to finish their current project and begin work on improving our space combat capability. It's telling, I think, that we don't need these warships to protect us from external threats, but instead from our very own people. We still have much to learn. Captain's Log 2209. I can't believe I've been recording this for 6 years now. Feels like our first interstellar mission happened only a few days ago. I can't believe what I see when I look at the photos from that first jump to Ramas. Bunch of naive, bright-eyed idealists in immaculate uniforms. Now we are older, more grizzled and scarred from our close encounters, but the idealism at the very least remains the same. Except everything is bigger, way bigger now. No longer are we the solitary ship in the void, charting a path across the verse. ridiculous. Between private owners and government ones, humanity now owns almost 100 ships, all darting across the sky. And I like to think I had quite a large part in making that possible. I really do hope my logs were useful to you, students of Astronaut Academy, but unfortunately my contract with your school is now at an end. I will still record them. I find them a perfect way to organize my thoughts, so maybe one day you'll hear your favorite Commander Kuo again. But for now, I have my job in front of me, just as you have yours in front of you. But I know that with all those lessons you learned, both from me and from your teachers, you will make humanity proud. I hope we'll meet someday, out there in the verse, or back on Ortus. Maybe you'll take part in a resupply run to keep CSV Tesla going. Maybe you'll join the crew itself, or who knows, maybe one day one of you intrepid students will replace me at the bridge of this magnificent ship. We still have much to learn, but I wish you good luck. Per aspera ad astra. Commander Shen Kuo of CSV Tesla, out. Good day to you, Commander Kuo. This is Prime Minister Ishii speaking. I hope this message won't interrupt any groundbreaking discovery you and your crew might be making, and I'd also like to apologize for using this form of communication. Considering what I have to say, a true conversation would be better, but as we both know, it's not really an option right now. Turns out light-speed data transfer isn't as fast as we want it to be. Regardless, I call because I, and the rest of the Council and people of Ortus themselves, need your help. I know I don't have to say it, but I'd like to ask you to keep this exchange strictly between us, at least until the matter is resolved. Now, where to begin? While you are out there exploring the unknown, we are starting to see some troubles back here on Ortus. Tesla's plan to incite a global rush for all spaceborne projects was successful, and your efforts increased the stellar fever even more, but we knew that with so much resources spent on expansion and exploration, it wouldn't be long before we overstretched ourselves, and that has happened already. As I record this message, Ocean's treasury is evaporating at an alarming rate. All those ships, all those bases and missions, not to mention Curacao colony, are a huge drain on our resources. A drain that doesn't provide us with any material benefits at this point. Sure, our science stations are pushing the boundaries of what we know, but the researchers out there are notoriously uninterested in things like economy or infrastructure. But the thing is that if we, the state, run out of money, no one will be able to fund their research. We want to be able to provide sustenance to our colonists on Curacao, and we want to be able to afford Admiral Lin's fleet. So we need money, and we need it fast, or the interstellar rush will end before it could truly begin. There's only so much money we can get from sponsors after all, and in 2 or 3 years we'll go broke. With that in mind, the Chamber of Commerce began searching for ways to cut costs across the land, and one of their ideas is pulling the plug from your mission. Your ship will be mothballed and your crew reassigned to some profit-oriented objectives until the crisis is over. I'm doing my best to stop them, as they clearly have no idea that your ship is possibly our best chance to overcome our issues, but to put a stop to their plan I'm going to need your help, and that's why I called. First, I need one of your people to be transferred back to Ortus. He's no one important, one of your geologists. I'm sending his dossier along with this message. Thing is, his profile indicates that he might be a man we solely need in order to reform our financial system, as he's sort of a hobbyist economist whose ideas are currently growing really popular among profit-oriented councillors. As soon as you can, you are to transfer him back to us, if you agree to this plan, of course. Second thing is more indirect. I want you to officially change the profile of your mission. Ever since you left Ortus, you and your crew discovered some amazing things, there can be no doubt about that, but in your efforts you focused too much on one thing. Think of the ruins on Nexon or Scorin IV. You had an option to greatly boost our industry and economy there, but you chose to hand these places to Science Council instead, and while I approve of your decision, a noticeable number of Industrial Wing wasn't too happy about it, and today we can see why. So, if you want to prevent Tesla from being grounded, you need to change your focus. Continue your exploration, but this time make sure to bring something valuable home. Something that could be processed or sold or mined. Something that would, at the end of the day, bring profit to us all. I know how this must sound to you, but trust me, I'm making these requests with a heavy heart. I'm hoping for your positive response as soon as possible, Commander Kuo. Whatever your decision, remember this. No amount of knowledge will be useful if there's no money to buy food in the end. Ishii out.